you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. $1 or something.
Recording live in the Conscious Creative Media Studios from somewhere in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, you are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast with your host, Bill Howard.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome to the world's greatest photography podcast, and I am your host, Bill Howard. Today we are with time-lapse, hyperlapse guru, tutorials on cell phones for photography. He's the owner of Lightbenders Visuals, I guess is the best way to say it, and you can find him on YouTube with his name, Brent Hall. Thank you for coming on board again, Brent.
Yeah, you bet.
I want to send this a certain way, I guess. I did a video recently using the new Samsung Note 10 Plus for real estate photography.
Okay.
It's not a bad camera. It does a pretty good job. It has a wide angle lens, it has a medium lens, and it has a close-up lens. The wide angle is probably equivalent to about a 12 or 13 millimeter on a full frame. So it's wide enough to shoot real estate.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The viewers that watched it loved it.
Awesome.
The real estate photographers that watched it, you would think I'm a leper. You would think I've stole their business. Do you think cell phones eventually will be seen in a different light by professional photographers?
I don't know. I think it'd probably take a long time, if ever. I think there's definite separation there. People don't want to think of a cell phone as being a camera, especially for people who are actually interested in photography, who already have cameras or already have a business or whatever. I think that's a hard gap to bridge for sure.
We know, like Casey Neistat, he did one of the great videos for YouTube and for creators called Do What You Can't. And in that, he says, all you need is a cell phone and a Wi-Fi connection, and you can be a YouTuber.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people start out that way. And it's not bad for video most of the time. Sound, you get your win, but for the most part, it does a decent job. The thing I like about the cell phones is the ability to upgrade and add apps that you don't get that choice with the DSLR. Some of the Sonys, you can get some aftermarket apps that you download in, but it's not the same as with a cell phone. You were talking about earlier in segment 2 about the Pro photo part of the camera on the Samsung 8.
Yeah.
I think the Samsung 9, when I got it, it didn't have the Pro mode.
Yeah, that was a big
it upgraded
debacle.
to the Pro mode later. So it's, do you think that the apps may help? And I'm not talking about filters such as Instagram, but the actual apps that Samsung and like the Google Pixel and, of course, the iPhone, that they will blend into these cameras will be enough to make up for it, such as I think they have a food mode on the Note 10.
Oh, yeah, I love the food mode.
That type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the apps definitely help bridge a gap. Like when Samsung took away the Pro Mode features for video with Android Pie updates, basically, I made a video about that, and then I made a video about, how do you deal with it now? There's no Pro Mode, and basically, there's two options. You can roll back to Android 8, which most people don't know how to do. It's not that hard, but if you've never messed with, that kind of routing and, all that stuff, it's a foreign concept. Or you can get an app like Filmic Pro, and Filmic Pro costs a little bit of money, but it gives you all of the Pro Mode options. It gives you all the controls, and it gives you a lot of stuff that even the native thing didn't have. And it's got its caveats. It's kind of a pain, it's a learning curve to get used to, but there's a lot of apps out there, especially for iPhone users, the apps are a lot better because they can develop them more stably. So the Moment Pro app for video is a lot better than on the iPhones than it is on the Androids. And like the Rode has an app for their microphones for recording, but unfortunately it's only for iPhones. But for iPhones, I mean, it's fantastic and allows you to get much better recording with plugging in a microphone into your phone. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that can definitely help get you to a more cinematic look or a more acceptable traditional image. There's still a lot of workarounds, but I think it's getting there for sure.
Do you think the major manufacturers such as Nikon, Canon, again, Sony does it to a small extent anyway. Do you think they'll eventually have it, especially with the mirrorless, the way everybody's jumping on it, that they'll have apps and allow third parties to also offer apps for their cameras? I
doubt it. At least not in the near future, I don't think. I don't think. I think if they do, I wouldn't be opposed to it for sure. But I think if they did, it'd probably take a long time to warm up to that.
I know, like with the Nikons, everybody hated SnapBridge. And finally Nikon came in and we don't have to connect via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. It allows a direct connect through straight Wi-Fi, and it's gotten a lot better, a lot easier to connect.
Oh, that's cool.
But, there's some apps called like DSLR Dashboard.
Yeah.
I think is the name of it, where you can connect to the camera through your cell phone to control the
there's a good one for that for Canon. There's a good one, DSLR controller, and I think that's just for Canon though. But it does a really cool thing. If I wasn't using my phone for seeing you right now, I would probably have that on there as my monitor. Because it's pretty handy.
Yeah. You see, like here in the podcast studio, Conscious Creative Media Studio, I've got a 7-inch LED screen on one camera, and the other camera I don't have a screen on at all. But yes, I've used it. I've used my cell phone for even some of my vlogs to set up the shot, make sure I was in focus, I was on a rule of third, or that type thing. So it works. If you can connect, it works.
Yeah.
Now, the cameras, as far as the cell phones, are they good enough to get like Milky Way shots yet?
Some of them are. I mean, it depends. I get that a lot. One of my biggest videos, and also one of my most hated videos, was can you shoot the Milky Way with the S9 Plus? And basically, right off the bat, I answered the question, no, you cannot. However, I kind of lied, because I think if you could do it, you could do it with some cameras by like stacking a lot of photos and taking darks and taking, and doing, it's a lot more complicated for astrophotography. And there are some phones out there like the Huawei phones that can do 30-second shutter and a little bit higher ISO. Like Samsung's, the highest ISO you can do natively is 800, and they have a 10-second shutter limit on all of the Samsungs that have Pro mode. And with those settings, ISO 800, 10-second, with the little tiny lenses that we have on the phones, it's just not good enough to do Milky Way yet. But I have seen some people with some phones who were willing and knew how to stack and do all of that and take the time in post-processing. I have seen them get some okay shots on the phones, but still nothing that I've seen that would even compare to an entry-level DSLR.
When you're doing, and we're going to go straight to astrophotography now off the cell phone.
All right,
when
sounds
you're
good to
shooting
me.
astrophotography and your time lapses, but let's say a still, for instance, do you shoot a bunch of images to stack for your night landscapes?
No, traditionally I haven't. You can, certainly. It just requires a little more effort. But I actually, one of my last vlogs I did, it's like my second to last video or something. It was all about doing images, and I used a 45 mil and I stacked probably 60 images. But there was no land, so it was all celestial. And that makes it much easier to stack, obviously. So I have started doing stuff like that, and I do workshops and stuff and I've got some workshops coming up where I'll be teaching people how to stack, and we'll be going out and doing more like serious astrophotography stuff. But traditionally with the landscape stuff, I've usually just, one shot's good, or maybe a couple shots bracketed, but that's usually for focus stacking, really, if I have something close in the foreground,
And is the 14 millimeter your widest lens?
Yeah. Yeah, it is right now.
So you're going with basically a 30-second at your maximum shutter speed.
I usually still tend to keep it at 25 seconds just to be on the safe side. Okay. But yeah, it's pretty up there. For most of my landscape and time lapse stuff, that's all astro, that's all dark sky stuff, I do use the 14. But I also really like the 28. The Tamron 2470, and if I had the 1535 G2 or the 1530 G2, I'd use that as well. But I've been liking the slightly longer focal lengths for astro, the 24, the 35, even the 45. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to pull off images, when you increase your focal length. But I think that's part of the interest to me, is it's a little bit more unique. There's less people out there doing astro at that focal length, so it makes it interesting.
You are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast with your host, Bill Howard.
With Brent Hall from Lightbenders Visuals. You can find him on Instagram and Facebook by looking up that term, Lightbenders Visuals, or you can find him on YouTube by going to Brent Hall. And about that, I recently did some shots, and I discussed with you about possibly doing some lighthouse shots when you come to the east.
Oh, yeah.
With a 50 millimeter at 1.4. And what I was trying to do was kind of get the Milky Way tight to the beacon of the light.
Yep.
And it actually came out pretty decent. I was scared that the light was going to blow out.
Mm-hmm.
But the dynamic range of the camera was enough where when I dropped the highlights and raised the shadows and did all that stuff, it came out fairly consistent.
That's cool.
One problem when you shoot, especially time lapses, is flickering.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do to handle your flickering?
Yeah, that's why I shoot in RAW, and that's why I shoot with LR time lapse. As LR time lapse will get rid of any and all flickering in every single time lapse I've ever had since I've started using LR time lapse. No matter if it was daytime, Holy Grail, Astro, whatever. LR time lapse has just completely saved things that I just would have never previously posted, before that. If you don't have LR time lapse and, all manual, and even, decoupling the lens and stuff like that, so that if you have an electronic aperture, that it won't keep redoing it. So like with the Rokinon though, with the 14, you don't have that problem because it's a manual aperture, so it's not going to change. So that helps a lot.
And, if you're trying to do this type of stuff yourself, take off the vibration control. Or the image stabilization, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You don't know it, but it jumps a lot.
Yeah. Depending on your lenses, it can definitely add. Some of my Canon lenses I've never had a problem with, but some of the other lenses, and it's like, God, why is everything looking a little bit blurry, or a little bit shaky? And it's like, oh, I should turn my IS off.
Yeah. Well, look, do you have any upcoming projects that you're going to be working on?
I've got a lot of stuff coming up, but I got a lot of traveling coming up. I'm going to be coming out there to the East Coast. Got a lot of fall trips planned. We're going to be going up to the Northeast, New England, Canada. I'm going to try to do some meetups. And while we're up there in the Northeast, I'm definitely going to be trying to do some long exposure stuff, some fall stuff. Even though it's the Northeast, I'm going to go to the mountains and stuff up in like New Hampshire and that area. So I'm definitely still going to be trying some astro stuff for sure. But we'll see.
Be sure to go to Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park. That's the first place that the East Coast will catch sunlight.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be a pretty cool holy grail going from night to day.
Yeah, I love Acadia. I'm definitely going to try and make some time for Acadia for sure.
Yeah. Well, we are with Brent Hall on the World's Greatest Photography Podcast, and he has just given us a wealth of information today. And again, I want to thank you for everything you've done, Brent. make sure you look him up on YouTube. He's got a huge following. I keep saying that. But anything over 28,470, we're going to say it's our fault.
Right on, I'm down with that.
All right, Brent, you have a good one. And thank you once again. You were listening to Brent Hall on the World's Greatest Photography Podcast.
Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. Get you $1 or something. Something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. Get you $1 or something. Something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something?